Tokyo, Metropolitan Police Department. Police officers in uniform came in and out, some looked relaxed and some were solemn. Inside the Metropolitan Police Department, a man and a woman came to an interrogation room. Mr. Nakano's spirit is a bit abnormal. Be careful. I'm just outside the door. If you have anything, remember to notify immediately. The middle-aged man patted Asako Nishinji on the shoulder and encouraged, "Come on. I will." Shinkawa Police Department. Saiwanji Asako took a deep breath while wearing a headset. After getting off, push the door directly and enter. This is a very special inquiry room. The interior of this interrogation room is all piled up with white tiles, clean and tidy, like a whole, without the slightest gap. Asked, the room was dark and there were no windows. After entering the interrogation room, Asako Nishindara gave a light cough and turned on the light with the sound. Before I spoke, I heard a horrified voice, "Close the door, close the door. Do you want to kill me?" A man with messy hair and shaggy hair saw Asako Saiwanji entering the door. He couldn't help screaming in terror. Obviously his spirit was a little abnormal. His eyes were red and bloodshot, and his eye bags were heavy. It was obvious that he hadn't slept normally for a long time. The eyeballs couldn't stop shaking, with panic and fear. The moment Asako opened the door of Saiwanji Temple, he was like a bird in a bough, with blue veins violent in his hands, and he quickly covered his eyes, as if he would see something terrifying. "I'm sorry." Hearing these words, Nishiwanji Asako hurriedly closed the door. You can see in detail that the door of the interrogation room fits perfectly with the room. After closing, there is not even a trace of gap. Saiwanji Asako looked at Ichiro Nakano, and after looking up and down, she saw that the other party was getting normal. She tentatively said, "Mr. Nakano, it's been 5 days, are you better?" Nakano Ichiro seemed much more normal after Asako closed the door. He squatted in the corner, heard the sound, did not look up, closed his eyes, and did not respond. "Mr. Nakano, we know that you have encountered something daunting. But this is the Metropolitan Police Department, no one can hurt you. If you keep not telling us the situation, it will make it difficult for us to start our work. You don't understand, you don't understand. There is a play." When Ichiro Nakano spoke, Asako Nishindara's eyes lit up. Nakano Ichiro was brought to this special interrogation room 5 days ago, and the other party called the police himself. But after being taken to the Metropolitan Police Department, they found that the other party was mentally on the verge of breakdown, and there was no information on how to ask them. The Metropolitan Police Department invited several psychologists to make the other party's spirit slightly restored. "Mr. Nakano, we can help you out of the situation only by telling us the truth. I have a few questions to ask you if you can answer it. As long as the information is sufficient, the Metropolitan Police Department can detect the case." "Mr. Nakano, you don't need it either." So worried and frightened. Saiwanji Asako slowly approached Nakano Ichiro, but not too close. She squatted down slightly, looking up at the other person, speaking softly. After finished speaking, she did not hear a response for a while. But she did not urge. Nakano Ichiro's current situation is much better than the previous few days. She naturally can't let the other party be stimulated. After waiting for a few minutes, Asako Saiwanji didn't have any impatience. She looked at each other quietly. For a long time, she saw Ichiro Nakano raise her head, and her eyes were happy. As soon as she spoke, she saw the pupils of Nakano Ichiro staring at her dilate, as if she had seen something terrifying. Nakano Ichiro opened his mouth and pointed his finger at Asako Nishindara, but the fear in his heart made him make a dry and meaningless sound. This fear is too real, as if it is contagious, which makes Asako Saiwanji a little scared in his heart. And the direction Nakano Ichiro pointed at was himself. Or behind oneself. At this moment, Asako Nishinji got goosebumps all over her body, and she didn't even dare to look back. No. No, Nishinji Asako caressed her emotions a little, and she found that Ichiro Nakano was staring at her, or, was it her own mouth? Subconsciously, she reached out her hand and touched her lips. There was nothing unusual. However, just this action caused Nakano Ichiro's mental breakdown directly. As if crushing the last straw of the camel, he used his hands and feet together, wanting to leave the woman in front of him quickly. As a result, he just got up and fell to the ground before taking 2 steps. As soon as looked up, he saw the shadow of the wall tiles. Besides myself, there is that woman. He saw Saiwanji Asako slowly approaching him, but, what made him horrified was that between this woman's lips, there was a bloodshot eyeball. This eyeball stretched the mouth of Asako Saiwanji's mouth more and more, and in the end it looked like a big mouth in a blood basin. The eyeball propped up the mouth, but it was not full. In the gap next to the mouth, there were eyeballs again, and the eyeballs swayed steadily. After that, as if he had noticed something, he put all his eyes on Nakano Ichiro's body. Don't! Was stared at, causing Nakano Ichiro to collapse directly. He just spoke, you reading www.youcanshu.com stopped abruptly. He saw that he had just opened his mouth in the shadow of the tile, and deep in his throat, there was a line of sight watching him through the tile. That is, another eyeball. The last string of the spirit is destroyed at this moment. Nakano Ichiro went mad. He put his hand into his throat, digging frantically. He wanted to dig out this eyeball. Only by destroying these eyeballs can he live a normal life. Saiwanji Asako looked at the scene in horror. She saw Ichiro Nakano put his arm into her throat, squeezing frantically. Blood spilled from the other's mouth. She fell to the ground. She was afraid of being unable to move, so she could only say tremblingly, "Xin, Xingquan Police Department, quick, come in." As soon as the words fell, the Xingquan Police Department rushed into the room. At this time, red and white are confused, rendering this special interrogation room into an artistic painting. "Mr. Nakano, calm down." The Shinkawa Police Department saw the crazy scene of Nakano Ichiro. He saw the opponent split his mouth and widened his eyes because his arm stretched into his throat, and saw the opponent slowly stretch out his arm, looking at the blood-covered palm. He smiled, finally dug it out. Xingquan Police Department was chilling. He shouted, "Come on!" And at this moment, Nakano Ichiro looked at his shadow in the tile. He turned sideways slightly, grinned. There is still one in the ear. Half an hour later, Nakano Ichiro's body was carried out. Looking at this scene, the Xingquan Police Department looked gloomy. Back to the office, he looked at a photo on the desk. The photo was a huge eyeball. He has a solemn expression. This is the 9th person who has died so strangely this month. Does hypnotism kill? After 5 o'clock in the afternoon, Shinji Kamihara got up from the soft sofa and stretched. Then, he looked at the 2 people sitting in front of the computer, took a jar of happy water from the coffee table, and came to behind them curiously. "What are you doing?" "Find a picture," Hideki Kobaya said. "Just when you were sleeping, there was a very beautiful girl who wanted to join the club." Nakamura chuckled. "She has already filled out the application form for joining the club. From now on, our ghost club will be regarded as having girls supporting the scene. Aren't we a video game club in ghost skins?" Shinji Kamihara was speechless. "You two are sure that the girl stayed for 2 days? So we are now absorbing supernatural knowledge." As Hideki Kobaya said, suddenly his eyes lit up. "I found it. Let me Kong. Kota Nakamura moved his head over. Standing behind him, Shinji Kamihara also stared at the past, his eyes condensed, his eyes deep. What came into my eyes was a monotonous picture, saying that it was monotonous because the entire picture was covered by a huge eyeball. The whites of the eyes and pupils in the eyeballs are very distinct, and there are bright red bloodshot eyes at the edges. It's as if the camera was photographed by the eyeball. The whole photo is cold tones, with a hazy feeling, and even more weird. I didn't feel much after listening to the story told by Kyunhui schoolgirl, but now I see this photo, but I feel a little scared. Kobaya Hideki looked at this photo, staring at it for a long time, and there was a sense of dreadful horror as his eyes were shaking, and he always felt that there was something around him looking at him. Nakamura Kota nodded and agreed. Look at it slowly, I'll go home first. Shinji Kamihara looked as usual, he patted the shoulders of the two of them, and went straight out. Now it's time for the club activities to end, and the sky is getting darker, so he naturally doesn't want to stay any longer. Wait, I'm going home too. Me too. Although the two founded the Ghost Society, they never watch horror and thriller movies. As soon as I saw it, I was panicked by this photo. After the three people arrived at the school gate, Hideki Kobaya suddenly thought of something. He smiled and said, Shinji, in order to give GS schoolgirl a good social atmosphere, I think you should cut your hair. Yukara Nakamura nodded in agreement, the hair on your forehead covers all eyes, just like the hero of the book. It made us both dare not have girlfriends, you know? Otherwise, in the first year of high school, Zayashu and I must have girlfriends. Shinji Kamihara did not speak. He stroked both temples with both hands, then tucked his forehead hair back, made a big back, and said lightly, Are you sure you want me to get a haircut? Hiss. Kota and Hideki took a breath. The two hurriedly waved their hands, saying that Shinji Kamihara was good like this, and don't cut any haircuts in the future, just keep it like this. Didn't go far, Shinji Kamihara could still hear the comments of the two friends behind. What, I have really known Shinji for a year. Stop your friendship with Shinji, or you will definitely be NTR by him in the future. I always feel that my head will be green in the future. Fat tiger plus male plus talent is equal to Shinji. Wait for words that make people incomprehensible. Shinji Kamihara was speechless, and soon he arrived in Meguro district by train. When was approaching the apartment, he looked at a large crowd of people in front of him. He took a few glances and found that all of them were holding mobile phones and looking up towards the sky. He raised his eyes, squinted and saw that at the top of the building, a girl in a red dress and red boots was sitting on the edge of the building. Committed suicide by jumping off the building? He didn't have any curiosity. He just glanced at it, didn't stay, and soon returned to Minghu apartment. Didn't say anything about I'm back, he didn't have this habit. And there is no one at home, do you tell the ghost? After returning home, he threw his school bag away and started cooking dinner for himself. After dinner, it was already past 7 o'clock in the evening. Came to the study, opened the chair and sat down. Rubbed the pendant on his neck. The next moment, a light flashed. A notepad appeared on the desk. This notebook is surrounded by a black atmosphere, and a grey-black light flows on the surface, exuding an ominous atmosphere. It's scary to look at. Shinji Kamihara took it for granted. He picked up the notepad and turned to the first page. Looking at the 6 characters of Urban Legend record, he turned to the second page without pause. Urban Legends, 1 legend point, 38,988 good and evil points, 280 spiritual power, 0 plus life, 92 days. As long as the person who has seen the photo and is eyeballed, his subsequent experience will be recorded in text on the page of this urban legend record. 1 person per page. Shinji Kamihara turned slightly, and there were a total of 109 pages. Most of the pages have been drawn to a full stop, representing the death of a person. Only a very small part still persisted, suffering from the sight of the cracks. But he believes that these people can't hold on for long, because the longer they hold on, the more painful the spirit will be. Soon, he turned to page 109, which recorded a person named Ichiro Nakano. He glanced a little and knew that he was another person who liked domestic violence. After marrying a wife and having children, the whole family lives in the shadow of each other. As long as there is something unsatisfactory at work, the grievances will be vented on the family members when they come back. This situation has been going on for 10 years. This scourge died, and it also contributed to society. He didn't read too much, because all the stories recorded on it were domestic violence. Reading too many such stories can make people feel depressed. He turned to the second page, looked at nearly 40,000 legend points, and couldn't help thinking about whether to write a second urban legend. After all, the urban legend of Sight in the Cracks does not seem to be efficient for some beasts to go to hell. After more than a month, only 109 pages, about 3 people a day. In this way, his efficiency in obtaining good and evil points is not high. And the point of good and evil is related to his life, and only the point of good and evil can increase his lifespan. When he crossed over, the lifespan indicated by the notepad was 30 days. He naturally didn't dare to test whether it would die if it became 0. Although he crossed over, his body became younger anyway. So he struggled for a month, using good and evil points to increase his lifespan by more than 90 days. And the acquisition of good and evil points, this month, he also has a bit of a clue. That is, the evildoer is killed by the urban legend he created, then he gets more good and evil points. As for manslaughter of kind people, will there be fewer good and evil points, or will they be directly deducted? He didn't know this, because he hadn't tried it. After all, he just wrote an urban legend. As for the legend point, it cannot be used for itself, it can only be used to influence urban legends. General urban legends have regional characteristics. This is also the characteristic of urban legends, but it is also its limitation. To make urban legends break through the limitations, you have to rely on legends. But for the legend point, he didn't do much research. Because he was overwhelmed by the countdown to death this month, his mind was full of survival. Now the sword of Damocles left the top of his head, making him breathe a little. However, I should hurry up to write the second urban legend. After all, the killing speed of Sight in the Cracks is too slow. Most people who like domestic violence are people with distorted and depressed personality, which is invisible on the surface. After being overwhelmed by various pressures in society, he vented these pressures on his family members and asked them to go online to read urban legends. It was basically impossible. And the story recorded on the following pages of Sight in the Cracks also shows that these people happened to see that photo, triggering the killing rules of urban legends, and were tortured to death. Now he has a lifespan of only 92 days, 3 months. It's still too urgent. If it weren't for the lack of legend points before, he would have written the second urban legend. Besides, he should also consider how to make money to support himself. Tokyo is after all an international metropolis, containing 1/3 of Japan's population. The consumption here is still very high, so he naturally can't sit and eat. The original owner originally had parents, but they are now orphans. After the original owner's father remarried, he planned to spend his honeymoon. As a result, the plane crashed and everyone on the plane had a thrilling bungee jump without a rope. It relieved him. Although it is not good to think so, it is barely acceptable to travel to Tokyo, Japan. But let him be called the Japanese parents, that is absolutely impossible. Besides, there is another sister. Only a year ago, because of the plane crash. After the funeral, his nominal sister went back to university. With all the money, he and this sister have lived for only a few days, and they are still very strange. Now the other party lives in university, and the two have not seen each other for a year, and they didn't even make a phone call, which is no different from a stranger. So this sister is like nothing. It's okay. I'm used to living alone. If I come to a family or something, it's really a headache. As for expecting that sister to support herself, he hasn't even surfaced this idea. And now he is thinking about things in the club in the afternoon. What's the matter with that Shinkachiet? Thinking of that girl, Shinji Kamahara couldn't help frowning. The story told by the other party in the agency is obviously the Sight in the Cracks written by him. Although he was lying on the sofa behind him, he didn't fall asleep at all. He didn't squint for a while until the other party finished speaking. But the story told by Jie Xingkai is too real, as if the other party had seen it with his own eyes. But as long as I saw that eyeball, it was basically hopeless. Although he writes in the notepad and sees the photo, he will be eyeballed all the time. But that is the setting written on the notepad. In reality, although this urban legend is circulating on the internet, but the circumstance is that seeing this picture, terrible things will happen. In other words, unless Xingkai Jie saw it with his own eyes, or had contact with someone who saw the photo being stared at by the gap, then he would understand. Otherwise it would be impossible for her to know such details. But he observed the other party for a while, and found that the other party was light-hearted and relaxed, and it was not like a child living under domestic violence at all. Otherwise, police. In the past month, with the exception of a few who are still struggling now, the number of people killed by sight in the cracks has already exceeded 100. It is natural to be noticed by the Metropolitan Police Department. It seems that Xingkai Jie's family is likely to be working in the Metropolitan Police Department. After thinking about it, Shinji Kamihara breathed a sigh of relief. He is not afraid of people from the Metropolitan Police Department. After all, he is just the creator of urban legends, and it is not him who killed people, so it is impossible to find himself. He is afraid of some onmyoges, witches or wizards. Although this month, he has not met anyone with extraordinary abilities. He even guessed that this world might be an ordinary world. But this is just a guess, and no encounter does not mean it does not exist. And this month, he has only been at home and school at 2 points and 1 line. As long as he passes by shrines or temples, he will avoid them far away. Is a notepad for fear of being discovered by others. This thing is related to his own life, he dare not let people know, he dare not go to the shrine or temple to ask for help. Because capable people are not necessarily kind-hearted, people's hearts are unpredictable, what will ghosts do when they know about them? Instead of handing over fate to others, it is better to decide life and death yourself. And the facts have proved that people still have to rely on themselves. After he figured out the rules of this notebook, he can barely settle down now. As long as you continue to create urban legends and obtain good and evil points, your lifespan can be increased. Even relying on this notebook, it is easy to break the limit of human lifespan. The next day, Shinji Kamihara sat in front of the computer in the study and yawned. He didn't sleep all night. Is not about studying, but looking through some horrible novels to accumulate experience for writing urban legends in the future. This situation has been going on for more than half a month. This is why he sleeps every time he goes to school, but the teachers and students are not surprised. It was like this when Shinji Kamihara was in his first year in high school. Of course, this is not the case in junior high school. After all, his father was still alive when he was in junior high school. After becoming an orphan a year ago, the original owner abandoned himself. Every day he went home to play games on the internet and went to sleep when he arrived at school. The teacher understands the situation and wants to enlighten it. But obviously the effect was not good, and as time passed, I had no choice but to sigh, and I didn't care about it. Fried 2 poached eggs for himself and soaked a cup of milk. After eating breakfast, Shinji Kamihara picked up his school bag and prepared to go to school. ONI sauce. As soon as he left the door and locked the door, he heard a familiar voice. He looked to the side, it was an 11 or 12-year-old loli, but the other person looked at him eagerly, as if a little lost. Junko, good morning. Smiled and greeted, Shinji Kamihara also looked to the side. It was discovered that some moving company employees in uniforms were moving things from the inside of the room. Kamihara-kun, good morning, I didn't bother you. At this time, a gentle and virtuous wife walked out of the room. Although Kojima Nami looked haggard, her eyes were gleaming, and it was much better than before. No, I'm going to school. Shinji Kamihara was a little strange. Sister Kojima, are you moving here? Shinji Kamihara had just crossed over a month ago, and after a little understanding of the world, when he was thinking about how to write the first urban legend, it was the neighboring Kojima family who asked him to make a decision. At that time, Nami Kojima and Jun-sun, mother and daughter, were still victims of domestic violence. At that time, every time he came back in the afternoon, he could see Nami Kojima with apathetic eyes. Even when the other party went downstairs to throw trash, sometimes they accidentally hit the wall. Is like an empty shell, a walking dead without soul. While Shinji Kamihara is familiar with the mother and daughter, it's because Nami Kojima will let Junko come out to escape every time her husband commits violence. Because the husband went crazy, even the daughter would fight together. Once the husband chased out the door, trying to drag Junko back. He happened to go out to buy something in the supermarket, and saw Junko crying and crying. He was upset at the time, so he beat the opponent and then called the police. But after all, it was Kojima's family affair. The police only intervened when they came over, so they didn't take care of it anymore. In those few days, Junko would always go to his house to avoid the limelight. It was also in those few nights that he wrote "Sight in the Cracks." Of course, he didn't let Kojima's husband look at the photo for the first time, but after a week, he let him inadvertently look at it. In just 3 days, there was news that Kojima's husband had committed suicide in the company. Without her husband's violence, Kojima Nami has gradually recovered her anger, and recently she can see a smile on her face from time to time. As for the sorrow of the death of her husband, maybe there will be before. But every fist fighting is a waste of feelings. Nami Kojima has no feelings for her husband anymore. Thanks to Jin Barakan's previous care. Kojima Nami bowed slightly, her eyes were bright, and she smiled. I plan to take Junko back to her hometown. After all, the rent in Meguro district is a bit expensive. Shinji Kamihara nodded, indeed. Meguro ward housing prices rank among the top 5 in Tokyo, and they are gradually rising every year. Fortunately for the house he lives in, the original owner's father has already paid off the mortgage. Otherwise, he probably has to move too. Do you need help? No, there are people from the moving company, it's enough. Nami Kojima looked at Shinji Kamihara carrying a school bag, and said quickly, it's not too early. It's almost time for class. Go to school. Junko, come and say goodbye to Big Brother. Junko looked at Shinji Kamihara reluctantly. She knew that this difference might never be seen by her big brother, who was already 12 years old. Thinking about it, tears flowed in his eyes, and his watery eyes stared at Shinji Kamihara, his voice choked, goodbye Aonichan. Goodbye, if you have any troubles, you can call your brother. With a slight smile, there is no banquet in the world, and Shinji Kamihara didn't say much, and he entered the elevator with his school bag. At the moment the elevator door closed, he could hear Junko's crying loudly, and Kojima Nami's comforting sound. For some reason, Shinji Kamihara suddenly became happy. I have been watching the stories of the abusers from the notepad before, which is depressing. But now that he learned from reality that after the perpetrator died, he saved a family in a disguised form, and his mood was much better. Sometimes happy, Yu reading www.yuyugonshu.com is that simple. As for Junko, maybe the other party went back to his hometown and went to a new school. After meeting new friends, he would forget him. Thinking about it, Shinji Kamihara felt a little lost in his heart. After all, he had crossed over before, suffering from the pressure of death, but the well-behaved Junko let him relax. Soon, he came to school. As always, when the class started, he slept directly on the table. He sits in the last seat, and the teacher doesn't bother to care about him. Sleeping time passed quickly. When he heard the school bell, Shinji Kamihara stretched his waist every day, packed up his things, and went straight out of the classroom door. Ghost Society is a society that the original owner joined a year ago. He didn't leave the club even though he crossed over. After all, isn't he fragrant in a small game audio-visual room? I can relax my tense spirit in the club. Hello senior, can you ask a question? Came to the club classroom building, and heard a voice before going upstairs. Turning his head slightly, he was a first-year boy. The reason why knows the grade is because the uniforms of each grade of Sakura Autumn High School are slightly different. The brooch on the chest of the first grade school uniform is orange, the second grade is bright yellow, and the third grade is dark blue. The school uniforms for girls are embodied on the ribbons. What's the matter? Shinji Kamahara said lightly. Excuse me, senior, do you know which floor the Ghost Society is on? Hearing this, he looked up and down at the other party, and found that the other party was wearing glasses, his face was slightly round, and his eyes flashed wisely from time to time. Come with me. Shinji Kamahara said directly, you are lucky, and I happen to be a member of the Ghost Society. Yusaki Karen was surprised and hurriedly followed in the footsteps of Shinji Kamahara. 1 hour later, the community is full of joy. Although Kota and Hideki regard Heron as their rivals, they are both simple high school students. After chatting, they became familiar with a few people and began to call themselves brothers and sisters. Although he said that he would win Shinkachiat, in the end it was just a glutton. Now that other people join the club, their thoughts are gradually extinguished. After all, the dead houses are very simple and kind. In the harmonious atmosphere, several people chatted quickly. By the way, do you know what happened yesterday? Yusaki Karen noticed that Jie was a little bit unable to connect. He picked up the phone and said quickly, a girl committed suicide by jumping off the building yesterday. Isn't this normal? I remember there seems to be a suicide sanctuary in China. It's not the same. Yusaki Heron put his mobile phone on the coffee table so that everyone could see. When this girl committed suicide, she was wearing a red dress and red boots. Red skirt and red boots. Several people are interested. Red clothes are normal at first, but it's unusual to wear them when you commit suicide. Looking at the forum, it seems that this girl was bullied at school and verbally violent by the classmates. In the end, she couldn't stand it before she did something stupid. Hey, this girl jumped off the building in Meguro area. I remember Shinji seems to live in Meguro area. It is indeed in Meguro area. When I went home yesterday, I took a look at the scene. At this time, Shinji Kamahara took off the headset. He has been typing for an hour, ready to give his brain a break. He happened to hear everyone talking about the suicide of girls, and when he heard it, he spoke directly. After that, he glanced at the photo and said lightly, I suggest you guys don't talk about it. Seeing everyone looking at him curiously, Shinji Kamahara continued, after all, who would wear clothes like this for suicide? A person who commits suicide in such a dress may have suffered a lot of physical and psychological harm during his lifetime. So, this is to curse the person who hurt her, so I wore it like this. Almost. Shinji Kamahara nodded. In my previous life, there was a Weibo Big V who explained this kind of thing. Many people who eat melon do not understand the thoughts of suicides. Do they think that they will not find a wilderness in the wild if they want to commit suicide? Must be in a crowded place? But these people don't understand that some suicides have been hurt during their lives, and various pressures force them to choose this way. Only suicide in a crowded place can arouse social attention. Suicides hope to help them get justice from society. And dressed like the girl in the photo, it must be done with great resentment. When she was alive, this girl didn't dare to do anything. But she hoped that after she died, she could become a ghost to seek revenge, otherwise why would she have to dress like this? This is also one of the reasons why Shinji Kamahara did not stay after seeing him yesterday. No matter what, I'd rather believe it and don't believe it. After all, isn't the notepad he masters the thing that creates ghosts? Thinking about this, Shinji Kamihara looked at the photo and his expression moved. But he didn't say much. Checking the time, he got up and said, "It's getting late, I have to go home." Together. Soon, Shinji Kamihara bid farewell to the people in the club at the school gate. As a result, within a few minutes of walking, 3 students in Yingkaiu High School's third-year uniforms were found in an alley, surrounded by a first-year student. Seeing this, Shinji Kamihara said hello toward the alley. Soon, the 3 third-year students looked behind them, their expressions changed slightly. "Kamihara. Cook, are you bullying a new student here again?" Shinji Kamihara put down his school bag, and he moved his muscles and bones, smiling and familiar. "How about adding me?" Seeing this, Kaiuji Kento, that is, the third-grade student in the lead, changed his expression. He snorted, pulled the 2 attendants, and stared at Shinji Kamihara bitterly. "Let's go." When he came out, Shinji Kamihara moved slightly, hit the opponent, and stomped Kaiuji Kento. Seeing Shinji Kamihara's provocative eyes, Kaiuji opened his mouth to scold him, but he endured it in the end. The other 2 attendants also silently said nothing. Are all senior high school students, have had countless dealings with Shinji Kamihara, and have been in the health room several times. Shinji Kamihara is still very famous in the bad circles of Sakura Autumn High School. No one. When Shinji was a freshman in high school, the 3 of them took to this small alley and threatened to borrow money. As a result, Shinji Kamihara hit 3, and directly sent all 3 of them to the hospital. Of course, Shinji Kamihara also suffered a lot of injuries. At that time, Shinji Kamihara had just died, and he was very depressed. Someone came to him and beat him up. Basically, they were dead hands. Although they had good exercises, they were still ordinary people in the end. 1 hit 3 was the limit. After that, Kaiuji Kento also found other evils to beat Shinji. But every time Shinji Kamihara was beaten to the ground, several people would get hurt. As time passed, they felt that Shinji Kamihara was a tough one, and never harassed him in the past. On the contrary, some people still admire each other very much, and want to pull Shinji together to be bad, but they are beaten back. All the bad circles in Yingkaiu High School think this guy is a lunatic. At that time Shinji Kamihara crossed over, reading www. When yuyuganshu.com accepted these memories from the predecessor, he still admired the predecessor. And when he crossed over, facing the threat of the 1-month lifespan of the notepad, he was also under great pressure. And fighting is sometimes a way to relieve stress, so this month, Shinji Kamihara has bullied these bad things. Seeing Kento Kaiuji endured it, Shinji Kamihara curled his lips. It's boring. Seeing the 3 people leave, Shinji Kamihara, carrying his school bag, also left directly. From beginning to end, he did not go to see the bullied students in the alley. Thanks. When the hills in the alleys raised their heads frequently, the people were already gone. He walked out of the alley with his school bag, only to see Shinji from the back. When Shinji Kamihara came to Meguro on the train, he had forgotten this episode. In other words, his mind is already occupied by one thing. Back home, Shinji Kamihara went to the study to turn on the computer and checked the girl who jumped off the building in the red dress and red boots yesterday. As Chie Shinkawa said, this girl committed suicide by the violence of the class. Words are like knives, and sometimes words that hurt people are more terrifying than physical harm. Originally Shinji Kamihara didn't know how to write the second urban legend, but when he was in the club classroom, he already had a clue, and he was thinking clearly along the way. Campus bullying is a social event all over the world, and it happens in every country, nothing more than a few. And Japan is a big country of campus bullying. Thinking, Shinji Kamihara opened the notepad on the desk. He turned to a blank page, picked up the pen beside it, dipped it in ink, and wrote directly. In 2020, midnight on April 8. In the morning, Qingchang Private High School. Aida Dottie came to the school carrying his school bag. He looked at the school gate with a resisting expression. Normal school entrance is full of students chatting and laughing, chatting and chatting. But some students in Qingcheng Private High School wear school uniforms, look nervous, walk in a hurry, and rarely talk side by side. The atmosphere is still very quiet. But soon Aida Dachi heard the conversation, and in a blink of an eye, it was a few students walking together. But by looking at the hair color, he knew that these were bad boys. Glanced a little, but he didn't see a familiar figure. He was slightly relieved. Then he quickened his pace and walked into the school, but before he arrived in the class, he heard the shouts from behind. "Yo, the earth!" Hearing the familiar voice, Aida Dottie shivered subconsciously. He didn't dare to go any more, but raised a humble smile and turned his head to look behind. "Brother Udu." Iwaguro Yudo stepped forward, pulled Aida Dachi with her back on her shoulders, and said with a smile, "I'm going to play in the video game street today. It's time for you to treat me." "This." Aida hesitated for a while, "But Brother Yudo, I had a guest a few days ago." "In the order, it should be Brother Yudo." As soon as he finished speaking, he felt a pain in his knee and fell to his knees. The next moment, with a slap, I was slapped on the cheek and listened to Iwaguro Yudo's smiling mouth. "What did you say?" Aida Dottie covered his face. He could feel the gazes of some students next to him, and said, "I'm sorry, Brother Yudo, I remembered it wrong. Today is my treat." The pain of the body is nothing, but the gazes of those eyes are like various tortures, trampling his dignity in the mud and dust, making him feel depressed and a little breathless. Iwaguro Yudo snorted coldly. He looked at Aida Earth on the ground, suddenly thought of something, and a smile was thrown at the corner of his mouth. He knelt down and said something in his ear. After Aida Dachi listened, his pupil shrank, and he looked at Iwaguro Yudo with incredible eyes. "See you this afternoon." Iwaguro Yudo smiled. After Iwaguro Yudo's trio walked away, Aida Daichi slowly stood up. He patted the dust on his body, cleaned up a bit, and limped into the class. Many boys in the class showed joking expressions when they saw Aida Dottie. But the opponent is the prey of Iwaguro Yudo, and according to the rules, they didn't bully each other. Qingcheng High School is a bad school, so naturally no one is attending the class. The noise in the classroom never stopped. During the lunch break, Aida Dottie went to the canteen to buy lunch. He didn't dare to go to the cafeteria, because the three of Iwaguro Yudo would eat in the cafeteria every time. If they were seen, they would probably bully him again. Back to the classroom, Aida Dottie breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh, really? It's true, this is a post that appeared on the 2CH forum last night, and it is still on the top. I heard that as long as the name of the person who resents is entered on the website of Hell Communication, the girl will send that person to hell. This is too scary. But it's fake at first glance. If that's the case, wouldn't society be messed up? And if it's true, wouldn't most of the people in our class go to hell?" "Puff, that's what I said. Hell girl?" Aida Dottie's ears moved, and he turned his head to see that two unscrupulous girls with yellow hair were talking. He opened his mouth, and finally did not speak. Instead, he finished his lunch, then sat in the seat, his eyes blank, and he didn't know what he was thinking. In the afternoon, the school bell rang. After the teacher called for the end of get out of class, Aida Dottie just left the classroom with his school bag. As soon as he left the house, three figures stopped him in front of him. Iwaguro Yudo shivered subconsciously when he saw Aida Taji's body. He spoke with a cigarette in his mouth. Go to the video game street." Aida Dottie did not speak, and was taken to the video game street by the three of them. After playing for a while, Iwaguro Yudo bid farewell to the other two, and then he put Aida on the shoulders and grinned, "Dachi, I want to be a guest at your house today. I have been a brother for so long, I still don't know you. Where do you live?" When Aida Dachi heard this, he couldn't help but think of something, his face was pale, he opened his mouth, and finally said nothing. He lowered his head, leading the way. You don't need to see it, Ida-dachi will know that Yuto must have an arrogant smile behind him. Soon, Ida-dachi arrived home. He stood at the door, but he did not open the door. Frowned, Yuto grimly said, Why? Still hesitating? Then you shouldn't bring me home. Even if you don't open the door today, I can come by myself another day. You are committing a crime. Ida-dachi's face was pale, and the fist in the cuff of the school uniform was squeezed tightly. You probably wouldn't say it. Iwaguro Yuto had a kind smile on his face and a threat in his eyes. Ida-dachi was desperate, and he opened the door. After entering the door, seeing that his mother was not at home, Aitiendati was very relieved in his heart, and he whispered, My mother is not at home, you can go. I can wait. Iwaguro Yuto looked at the living room slowly and sneered, Your house is really broken. Ida-dachi's face flushed. A few minutes later, there was a sound of opening outside the door. Ida-dachi didn't say anything, Iwaguro Yuto couldn't help licking his lips, Go back to the room, remember that you can't go downstairs until there is any movement. Ida-dachi opened his mouth. Just as he was about to say something, I saw Yuto Iwaguro staring at him fiercely, and said coldly, Don't get out yet. When Aitiendati went upstairs, I could faintly hear the conversation below. Hey? Are you? Hello auntie, I am a friend of Dottie. Dottie just went out and said that he would go to the supermarket to buy some snacks to entertain me. I can't persuade me no matter what, I can only wait here. Really? Then you sit down. Dottie has friends at school, and he didn't tell me before. You can stay today and I will make some delicious treats. This, isn't it good? It's fine. Ida-dachi clenched his fists tightly, his face flushed and his breathing was short. Back to the room, Ida-dachi turned on the computer, and he logged into the 2CH forum. UU reading www.uuganshu.com soon, Ida-dachi found a post. In other words, this post is being pinned to the top. Does girl really exist? Clicked into the post, he breathed short, his eyes bloomed with hope. The hell communication that can only be accessed at midnight and 0 o'clock. If you fill in the name of the person who cannot be quelled here, the girl of will appear and drive the person you hate into the abyss of hell. He glanced over the reply. What new urban legend is it? Hell girl. Is there a new drama to be produced by an animation company? Is it being promoted now? I just went to search, this communication website actually exists, but it seems that it can't be accessed now. It's definitely not possible to visit, after all, it will be midnight, laughs. Don't you think it's weird? The nickname of the poster seems to be a bunch of garbled characters. I remember the 2CH forum, can't you use garbled names? Are the moderators making extra money and making gimmicks for commercial companies? Still on the top. I plan to try it at night. Recently, I have been running on my colleagues and just want to kill him. General urban legends are ghosts and ghosts, although there are no ghosts in this world, it is still recommended not to try randomly. Can only visit at midnight. Ida-dachi hammered off the table severely, he wanted to let Iwaguro Yuto die now. But Ida-dachi also knows that even at midnight, this so-called girl is nothing more than an urban legend. As those replies said, it must be an entertainment agency's propaganda method. Think of Iwaguro Yuto downstairs. Do you really want to humiliate your mother?